important to realize. This is, your Mishnah and your Gemara over here in the middle of the page, and so you'll see on any other page, right? You have this is all the Talmud right here. On the inside of the page is Rashi. Okay, Rashi is one of our main commentaries on the Talmud. So right here, this is Rashi's commentary. Okay, and right here is Rashi's commentary. Right here, and then on the other side is what's called Tosfos. Tosfos is a bunch of other commentaries who as well made their different comments on the Talmud. And they're on the other side of the of the page. So just important to realize every single time you always know Rashi's on the inside and they're on the outside. Just a quick story, by the way. You'll appreciate. I actually share this with my students because they're starting now in Chumash to learn about Rashi. So I just shared it with them. That's actually an amazing story about Rashi. Right, Rashi's parents were. Rashi stands for two different things. Rashi stands for, one thing is Reb Shlomo Yitzchaki. His name was Shlomo, and his father's name was Yitzchak. So Rashi, Reish Shin Yud, is Reb Shlomo Yitzchaki. The other thing it stands for is Rabban Shel Yisrael, which is Rabban, our rabbi of Yisrael, of all the Jewish people. I mean, he was the great leader of the Jewish people. He was known during his time as like literally the big rabbi. The story about that his father, he was a big jeweler, and he had this sapphire, and it was a special sapphire that was part of his his collection. At one point, the king wanted, as part of his new idol that he was going to have so the king requested. He went to Reb Yitzchak, as he was known. He went to Reb Yitzchak and he told him, he said, "Listen, I want to please buy this sapphire off you. I know you have this. I'll give you $1,000." And he said, no, can do. I'm not gonna sell it. He said 2,000, 3,000. He kept going, and he said, no, I'm not gonna sell it for it's gonna be part of the idol. I'm not gonna sell it. So basically, the king was gonna take him and have him brought there and probably have him killed or whatever it was. So he said, Yitzchaki said, I'll come with you on the trip, on this boat ride to the king, and I'll come. And to make a long story short, basically, he came with him on the boat ride, and he kept trying to make it like exciting, enticing with the person who he was with to tell him that he would want to see the sapphire. So at a certain point, he was like so enticed by it. He was so, can I please see it? And he showed it to him. And then basically what occurred is Rabbi Yitzchaki faked dropping the sapphire out of his hand, and that it fell into the river. Now we're talking, in those times, we're talking millions of dollars over here, I'm saying? Like, this is basically all his money's gone, he has nothing right now. So he comes to the king, and the king's all upset at him, and, how'd you lose it? He's upset at the other guy, why'd you ask for it? He's upset at everyone. And he goes home then, the king gives him a little bit of money to go home, but he's all, and so the way the story goes is they say that then it was known. They say that somebody came back to his house and that Eliyahu Navi was there. And Eliyahu Navi told him that, you see, because of this, Hashem was going to reward you. And they were childless for many years. And suddenly then they had a child. And their child's name, they named him Shlomo. And he became Rashi. They were following the Torah, whatever, not using it for an idol, and that's what. But he was one of our great rabbis, and he started off by telling us that we're going to discuss the three different forms of what's called a kinyan, which is acquiring a form of acquisition. There are things in the Torah that are different forms of what's called acquisition, and it says that a woman, ha'isha niknis b'shalosh drachim, says that a woman is acquired in three ways. So this is talking about the marriage of a man and a wife. And we'll see in a moment, we'll just read a few lines over here for a minute, and we'll see them, and we'll discuss just the points over here, what's going on. It says, V'kones asma, she acquires herself b'shtei derachim, in two different ways. And the Mishnah is now going to tell us what are the three ways that a woman can acquire herself. So it says, niknas, kesef, b'shtar, u'bebia, that woman is acquired with kesef, which is money, with shtar, which is a document, and with bia, which is marital relations. Okay, then the Mishnah continues on and it asks, it says...
Wait, those are the three ways?
So those are the three ways that a woman is acquired. Now, let's just get something clear for a moment. Okay, there's, right, a marriage ceremony nowadays, right? If a person's attended a marriage ceremony, the marriage ceremony nowadays, everything's all at once, right? It's all right. The person gets, first people get engaged, right? Now, and then they get married, right? Whereas a few months later, or a year, or whatever it is, I'm saying, then they get married, and everything takes place. What we call the two aspects of marriage all take place during the marriage ceremony, the wedding, when they have, and then that's it. They're done. That during the olden days, let's just call it, the engagement process was very different than our engagement process now. Our engagement process now doesn't have much halachic validity, in the sense that it's not that you're really, obviously, we say hopefully the person's engaged, they're staying engaged, and they're not, but unfortunately but there's not much halachic validity in that. In the old days, there was tremendous halachic validity in what's called, there was something called kedushin. Okay, kedushin is being what's called mekadesh, becoming betrothed to the person. And there's another thing, and there was another name for that, which is called erisin. Erisin is a person becoming aris, which is also that form of betrothal. And there's something called nisuin, which is the marriage. Okay, now the question, now our Mishnah is going to be dealing with the kedushin process, which is that first step, but it's very different than what we have nowadays. Because during those days, when the person then had this level of what's called kedushin, which is, let's just call it engagement, but it's much more than engagement, they were in a way already set for this person. You know what I mean? They were, even though they were still living in their parents' house, the girl was still living at that point in her parents' house, but she was already engaged, quote unquote, to this person, that she's right now can't go marry another person at this point. She's halachically forbidden to go marry another person. She's attached in a way to this concept. What does it mean, bekesef? They're a big opinion in the Mishnah. They many times have disputes with what's known as Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai omrim, bedinar uveshava dinar, with a dinar, which is an amount, a coin amount, and I think he has over here, he mentions it was a value of a gold, of a what's called a silver dinar. He calls it, and he says on the bottom over here, worth 1/25th the value of a gold dinar, but it's a certain type of silver content. Let's just leave it at that. And uveshava dinar, and the amount of a dinar, which is very interesting. Ubeis Hillel omrim bepruta uveshava pruta. Beis Hillel come along and they say no. In terms of the amount of kesef that needs to be given, all you need to give is a pruta, which is less than that, uveshava pruta, or the amount of a pruta. So let's stop just for a moment over here. And what usually happens by a wedding? What happens? The man gives what to the girl?
Ring.
A ring. Okay, you know why he gives a ring?
It's giving her money.
Okay, so one of the main reasons actually, which is when he's giving that ring, they actually ask you before. I remember when I was getting, they were asking. They said, is this ring? You got to make sure that ring is worth a pruta, which means that it's worth this amount. Now, pruta is not much, you know what I'm saying? In terms of, but so it's even like this cheapo. It could be very cheap in that sense, but it has to be that value of a pruta, and that's why the person gives a ring, which is that I'm giving you money right now, which is the kesef that I'm giving you, that money value that I'm giving you to make, let's just call it this kedushin in a way, to make this. There's actually a Rashi. Very interesting. He says the words mafarish bebraisa, which means that it's explained in a brisa. Brisa is a Mishnah, which was it wasn't recorded in the official Mishnahs, but it says. The Gemara, it says, no sin la kesef or shava kesef. Let's say if a person gives to a lady kesef, which is money, or shava kesef, or the value of money. And then he says to her, v'omer la, he says to her, harei at mikudeshes li. You are mikudeshes, you are betrothed to me. Right? Now, does any of this sound familiar? Right? Does any of this sound all familiar? This is what happens by a wedding, right? I'm saying a person gives, right? He gives. Right. So he gives the ring, and as he's giving the ring, then he says these words. Right. This is part of the marriage ceremony, right over here. Now then it describes what happens if a person would give a shtar. A shtar would be if you give this document. Okay, so you give her this. So you write it on what's called, it says kosivla al hanir. You write it on this piece of paper. And he says, afal pi, even though she'eno shava pruta, even though the paper is not worth the value of a pruta, which is this value of money. And then what are you doing? And you're writing these words, Hareya mikudeshes li, you are mikudeshes to me, and then you're going to give it to her. Now what's interesting, meaning, if we say this concept that you have to give to her something that's worth a pruta's value, which is this, let's just call it pruta value of money. So you're giving her something which in a way is not so worth a pruta value, right? It's this piece of paper which might be worth a penny or nothing, right? But the Mishnah seems to say that when you're marrying her through the concept of shtar, which is this document, then you're marrying her, it's working through shtar, right, which is the document. It's not working through this concept of needing kesef, which is needing the amount of a pruta. Okay, so it's working through stars, even though it's less than a shava pruta. It's less than the value of a pruta. And then it says if a person's doing it through marital relations, it says as well, the person performs that, and then it says iskad as well. They say these words that marry me through this these relations. So the Mishnah, let's just do 2 more lines of the Mishnah, or 3 more lines, and then we'll discuss them. Echad mishmona be'isser haitalki, which is actually 1/8 of the Italian Isser. It was a type of coin, which is an Italian coin. So I guess that's what people were familiar with during that time. That's why the Mishnah is mentioning that over here. But the Mishnah is actually discussing, meaning because we know that we usually follow like Beis Hillel's opinions. That's why we want to get a little more clarity, I guess, into what the pruta itself is, because the pruta, we're saying Beis Hillel holds like the pruta, so we want to get a little more clarity into what that is. So therefore, we give the specifics in terms of what that pruta is. The Mishnah then goes on and says, "V'kones atzma," she acquires herself beget uvemisas haba, which means through either a get is a bill of divorce, or with misas haba, with the death of the husband, which means to say that how is she got into this marriage 3 ways, and she gets in a way out of the marriage in 2 ways, right? One of those ways is through what's called a get, which is a divorce, and the other way is an official document. It's written on what's called a shtar, which is the whole document and the whole process, and a misas haba, which is the death of the husband. Now, interesting to note, by the way, the Mishnah never says additional points, right? So does anyone have any thoughts over here? Why does the Mishnah, if I ask you a question, right? Everything, when we always look at a Mishnah, you have to always analyze and say, like, well, does anything look extra over here? So, even at this point, let's just stop for a moment and think, does anything look extra in this Mishnah? Is there anything that you say, like, I don't know, looks a little like not so necessary, or not so, why does that need to be? Meaning, because it's like the Torah, it is the Torah, I'm saying, but it's like the Torah, we analyze a Chumash and say, hey, Hashem didn't write any extra. There's also in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't have any extra. So if anything is extra, right, that we think to ourselves, if I would have written one thing, I wouldn't have needed to write the other. So what do you say?
Why say that she acquires herself by his death? He's gone. There's no longer a partner. And why? I would say, why put that in there?
So that's interesting. I mean, Todd's got an interesting point. I mean, why altogether does it need to? Meaning, you say that's what we call pasha. That's obvious.
Right.
You say if he's dead, that's obvious. So I don't know. Maybe I might say. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'm sure there are other cultures where you're still tied to the spouse.
So
cultures where you throw yourself in the fire. So different cultures have different.
Meaning, maybe, how do we know necessarily if a person, let's say, A was married to this woman, right? He was married to the woman. Now suddenly he's dead. Is she suddenly totally at this point like free to go marry someone else?
No.
Or do you think, I don't know, maybe, meaning maybe you'll need a get, right? Maybe I understand that in a situation, a regular situation, okay, the person wants to get divorced, they have a get. right? But now the person dies. So is it like, boom, you're free? Or do we say maybe, well, he's dead, I understand you don't have a husband anymore, but that doesn't mean you're free. It is, and however many years, and suddenly then they have no children. And at that point, he dies, okay? The man dies. So she was married to her. I'm sorry, she, was married to him, and she had no children with him. And the Torah actually says, I don't remember the pasuk offhand, actually, it's over here. Actually, I do. I'll just read it to you, actually, because it's interesting to see inside. But the pasuk says, the sentence says as follows, that when they're together, and one of them dies, and they have no children, so then we say Yavama Yavo Aleh. The person goes and has the Yavama, which is the brother of this person who died. It has an obligation to take her as a wife. Now, why? You say, well, that sounds a little interesting. Meaning, we need to carry on what's called the shame, the name for the family's sake, right? What happens? Usually, right, a person has a kid, right? It's the kid that takes on the family name, right? So you're keeping the namesake going, keeping the name. Now, if she has no children, right? So then this guy, basically this family, so the name is, Rubenstein, who knows whatever it is, right? So now the Rubenstein name is going to be gone, right? We have no more, and not only the name, the whole family, it's much more than the name, just the name. It's the whole lineage, everything's going to be gone. There's no more, the Rubensteins are out of the picture right now. But if the brother then goes and marries her and have children with her, so then we're going to keep it going, right? So there's something called Yibum. Yibum is a mitzvah in the Torah. That's something we don't practice anymore. But it's something called the mitzvah of Yibum in the Torah. And there's something, if a person doesn't want to do it, what happens, that's a different thing called chalitza. We're not going to discuss that right now. But there's the mitzvah, so Taz sense that now the brother's got to go marry her. There's attachment really to the brother that has to go marry her, has an obligation to marry her. So she's still sort of like attached, or to some degree, not free. Let's call it not free, right? I think that is probably what I would say as well over here. Meaning, the standard cases, we're assuming they are having. People are saying that they are having. You're right. There is that situation, and even within that situation, by the way, even within that situation. Does it mean that she's not? We say that misas habal means that she's not. You're right. There's an obligation of yibum now, which is on the brothers to go marry her.
She doesn't have to accept that obligation.
So that's true. She doesn't have to accept it, but then there's something that has to be done, which is it's a process known as chalitza. But you're right. It's not. I wouldn't necessarily say that she's, again, if he dies, if he's gone out of the picture, she now is not really attached in a way to him. There is a mitzvah then on the brothers to keep things going, but I don't know if necessarily we'd say that she's attached. I don't know, that part's a little bit up for discussion, whether you'd say she's still attached to him. There's a mitzvah to keep the namesake going. That's what the Torah says, to keep the name, whether that means
just an obligation. Attachment.
Right, so I'm not sure about that. I hear that. I hear that point. That part's a little up in the air. But I think the answer is really a little bit more what Sam is saying. That the Mishnah is talking in a standard situation. We're talking that they had children. You're right. You have a situation where it's not so. Where that's definitely not the typical case, right? We're assuming that they did. And for that case, I guess it's a little up for discussion whether that means they're really attached. You can hear it two ways. You can hear that they are, and it's just there's a mitzvah obligation on the brothers to take care of it, or you can say they're really not, that they really are attached. But let's put that on hold for a moment. But so you notice he says these words. He says I'll read it for everyone. It says Vav Yud Lamed, which means V'yesh Lomar. So he's answering the question. Let's just say what his question is. His question is, which is a line up, the words Tema. Tema is a wonderment, right? Which means it's a very difficult question. I used to have a Rebbe who would tell me, which is very true, that when Tosfos talks, it's very important to realize the difference. Tosfos uses different words to imply the different level of the question. So there are certain questions when you'll see Tosfos say the words Ein lahakshos. Let's say, don't ask the following question, which is like a sort of like throw it in. Don't ask, it's not such a big deal of a question. or Vakasha, which means, and is like a higher level. Tema is a wonderment. Tema is like, this is a bomb question. That's what, so it says the words Tema. That means Tosfos must have a pretty solid. He says, Delo havile lemisni. It didn't need to mention Ella b'shava pruta. So he feels that all Tosfos, so it doesn't seem like he's going well, let's see, but it doesn't seem like, Tosfos seems to say that the Mishnah only needed to mention the word shava pruta. And then he feels like, of course, and he quotes then Kiddush ben Azav, as we say in Bab Metzia, and he quotes this Gemara over there in Bab Metzia, which says that the words there are 5 prutos, and it says the words then b'shava pruta, and a woman is betrothed with a shava pruta. So it's saying b'shava pruta, and it's not saying with a pruta as well. It's not saying b'pruta or shava pruta. It just says b'shava pruta. So he's using that as a proof to say, oh, well, all over there you see it just said b'shava pruta. So over here also it's just need b'shava pruta. And obviously he feels, I'm saying Tosfos feels in his question, that saying b'shava pruta alone would be enough to say, of course, then a shava pruta itself will work. I mean, that seems to be his question, right? Mm-hmm. So for some reason, right, we'll have to, Todd's point is a very nice point, meaning, and I do hear that logic. It's interesting logic, the way Todd was saying, but it doesn't seem like Tosfos is going with that logic, right? You see from his question, right?
Usually I'm in the minority, by the way.
Say again?
Usually I'm in the minority.
That's all part of learning. It's all good to hear the different, listen. No, it's important to realize also what, meaning, I will have to maybe try to get a little clearer, like why. I hear what you're saying. It's a very nice thought, but it doesn't seem like so look what he answers, and we'll just read the words of it says, V'yesh lomar, which means, Vav Yud Lamed, means there is to say, that Mishum detana kan bikesef, because we learnt here the words bikesef, with kesef, meaning, when we get to the Talmud itself, the Gemara is going to tell us that we wanted to mention out this point specifically about a woman getting married through kesef, through getting money. That was a very important part of the of our Mishnah. And being that it was a very important part of our Mishnah, it said mafarish be'eza kesef. The Mishnah wanted to explain which kesef, right, which money it was. So it said, therefore, a dinar according to Beis Shammai and a pruta according to Beis Hillel. Right? So, and then it says, and since we didn't want to make any mistake to say specifically kesef and not shava kesef, so we had to mention also shava kesef. Right? So it sounds like he's answering both, right? He's answering both things, right? Why, if you ask me why if it just said shava kesef, why wouldn't that be enough? So the answer to that is because we wanted to specifically mention kesef, and once we mentioned kesef, we wanted to explain that it was specifically talking about that dinar and the pruta. Next time but let's just get, I don't know what the hour's getting, but let's just a few more minutes over here to get into the Gemara itself over here, just to see at least the first question. The Gemara at this point starts discussing very much, it gets a little bit technical, but like in terms of the wording of the Mishnah. So we'll just do that first question. We'll try to see a Rashi over there, and maybe we'll end off with that. I don't want to get too late for anyone over here. So the Gemara starts off. It says Ha'isha niknas, right, which means that the woman is acquired in 3 ways, right? So we're on the Gemara, right? See where it says the Gimel and the Mem. So the Gemara says the first question is Mai Shna Hacha. What is the difference over here? Detani Ha'isha niknas. That here it mentions Ha'isha niknas, the woman is acquired. Umay Shna Hasam, and what's the difference over there? And we'll discuss for a moment what over there is, which is the first Mishnah in the second parak, second chapter. Detani Ha'ish Makadesh. That it says the man betroths. Okay, meaning to say, let's first think what is he asking? Okay, before we even go any further. And so there's the second chapter, the first mission in the second chapter says that a man is able to betroth a woman, him and what's called his shliach, his representative, his agent. Okay, so that means to say there's a very big concept in Allah, but Rashi points out what this question is. He says, "Umay shna hasam." What's the difference over there? So he says, where's that? You might say, okay, you're going to look and say, well, what's this talking about? Well, he tells you, Beperik Sheni, in the second chapter, right, which is on Mem Aleph, which is 41a. Ditana, that it learned over there, Ha'ish Mekadesh Bo Ubashlucha, which means that a man is able to betroth, do Kedushin, to a lady, and a man's Shliach, which is his agent, is able to perform the Kedushin, right? Which is a whole topic in and of itself. We're not going to discuss that right now, but it says, Nisni Hacha Ha'isha Miskadeshes. Mention over here, Ha'isha Miskadeshes. The woman should have the act of betrothal, whatever the exact English word for that, will become betrothed. That same wording of Kedushin, which was mentioned in the second chapter, should be used over here as well. In the first chapter, let's keep Kedushin, and let's make it that is, so what we want to keep things synonymous, as much similar as possible, right? Now, that is the Gemara's question, or what the Gemara feels. The question is right now at this point. Now, what would you say? And we'll end off with this part, because again, I wanted to get to. What would you just say would be more questions on the Gemara's going to have a whole answer to discuss it, that we wanted to again, as we had mentioned, say kesef, and kesef has to be with a kinyan, right, which is an acquisition. So therefore, kesef together with the kinyan, we wanted to say the word kinyan. Kinyan is an acquisition. So therefore, we wanted to say the word nickness over here. That's going to be the basic answer. But what's going to be another question on that? So now let's say we understand why it has to say kinyan here in our Mishnah. Okay? So once you say that, what would be the next question that would follow, probably?
So why don't they just say it over there?
Oh, very good, right? Back then over there, right? We're going to keep going back and forth, right? You say, okay, now you understand why I say kinyan over here. Let's go back over there and say, it says Ha'ish, the man, Mekadesh, right? Did Kedushin. What do you mean? So I understand you guys say kinyan over here. Let's keep it similar. Say over there, the man was Koneh, right? The man, and that's actually going to be the Talmud's next question, which is actually on. But let's just say out the answer, and then we'll end off with that. But it meant the Gemara's question is a mention over there now, Ha'ish Koneh, that the man should be Koneh, which is again using that same word of kinyan. And the Gemara answers that no, it says the words Me'ikara originally Tani Lishna Doraisa. We wanted to mention a wording, a Torah wording. That means the word Kedushin is a Torah wording. Right? The lebesof tani lishna derabanan. Kinyan is a Torah wording. At the end, we wanted to mention a rabbanan, which is something from the rabbis, which is the word kedushin. Kedushin is something from the rabbis. How do we know something from the rabbis? He says, "My lishna derabanan the aser la kuli alma kehektish," that you forbid. This woman is forbidden like hektish. Hektish is in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash. Things that were of a holy stature, a holy nature. And so the woman is becoming holy to you in the sense that she is usher, she's forbidden to other people, and she's only permitted to this person. So it's kind of I wouldn't say it's tactical, but it wanted to specifically, it didn't want to say in that other Mishnah also some form of kinyan, right? And it wanted specifically to say something which was a kedushin wording, which is the words, which is something from the rabbis, right? So first we want to say a doraisa, which is the Torah, and then we want to say a derabanan, which is from the rabbis. And the Gemara is going to go then and continue on with a little more, keep going back and forth. But that's the, I guess you call it the basics. I don't want to get too late for it.